Hello everyone, hope you're all doing great today. Before the video starts, there's a message I'd like to share. If you'd like to go to the stories, and there's timestamps in the description below. Sorry if there's lots of background noise too in this. It's the entirety of the world seems to be in the surrounding houses to where I'm recording this at the minute. And for today I'd just like to share this. Well, firstly, should I say, I think a lot of people don't realise that what they suffer from might not be normal, because if that's the entirety of your existence and how you've experienced things, it's pretty easy to normalise it and think, oh, I'm not a confident person, I'm an anxious person, and so on. Whereas in reality it might be a problem that you don't realise you have, and one that you might need help for, and that help could change your life. I would think before that, oh, I'm just naturally more anxious than other people, and that was that. But when I realised what I had was an actual problem and that I could get help, it really got the ball rolling for therapy, and then that therapy literally changed my life. And the changes weren't instant, and it took me a while to find a good therapist. Well, not really too long, to be honest, but I had to go through 2 or 3 to get a good one. But finding that good one really changed my life, so if there's any of you out there that even think you might have a problem, now's the time to start researching it. And what's the harm in seeing a therapist? It could literally change your life, so just trust the process and see how it goes. I really think that's important. Also, I actually don't understand why mental health isn't taught in schools, but I guess I'm not in control of that. But I was just thinking of it the other day. I was like, oh. Another point I wanted to say, again, is something I've said before, but remember that you are the hero of your own story. You have the power to change everything. It's up to you to start making the changes and make a decision every day that no matter what happens, I'm going to keep after it and stay in the fight and keep doing what I know I need to do. It's very easy for discomfort to stop you doing what you know you need to do. You might need to exercise and see, oh, it's not sunny anymore. It might rain, I'm going to go back in, but you have to still go out there and get after it. Of course within reason, but you need to stay on top of your mind sometimes to bring out changes that you want in your life. It's through doing this over time that your mind can really callous and grow stronger, far beyond what you realise you could have done before. And I'm telling you, you have unlimited potential. And a lot of people tell you, oh no, you can't do things, but it doesn't matter. I've said this before, but if you ran a 100-mile race, they'd say, oh, you can't do sprints, that's why you done it. So you have to shut off completely what other people think about you, because realistically it doesn't matter. All you can ever do is do your very best and keep on growing. So their opinion should mean nothing. So I hope them points can actually help some people. I believe in you and love you, and I'll speak to you soon. And make sure you check out my Instagram at Joe the Insomniac and the podcast in the description below. Take care. I hope you're having a great week. Years ago, when I was still a teenager, my friend Justin and I would often go longboarding at night. As my friends and I are quite the night owls, we love the freedom of almost never seeing another soul on the roads or the paths we frequented. Even when using main roads, it would be very rare to see a car out so late in such a rural area. And you could see or hear them coming from very far away due to their headlights and the noise of the vehicle disrupting the peace. We were really into it at the time and would often ride our boards for miles and miles, not seeing anyone until the sun was up. One particular night, we decided to ride a few miles away from our usual back roads to take one of our favourite hidden routes. It began with a narrow, paved path that was the only piece of land separating 2 sides of a long lake. It would often sink under due to rain, and we wanted to seize the opportunity to use it before it rained and went underwater again. It was roughly 2 miles long and extremely relaxing to ride through due to scenery. After making it to the end of the lake, we decided to keep moving and continue on our way and turn into a very close path that leads into a densely wooded area of a national park. As we came up to the first hill, We looked down at the bottom into the blackness. We both noticed what appeared to be a tiny ball of light moving down there. At first we think it's a park ranger, but it moves so strangely, and it was extremely difficult to make out what it is. Rather than shine our flashlights down, we curiously watched out for a few moments, whispering to each other what it could be. And all at once, that small light turned into multiple blinding lights and extremely loud revving sounds. Overwhelming our senses as to become accustomed to the darkness and silence. Acting purely on fear, we instantly turned around and ran as fast as we could, hearing yelling and revving gaining behind us. By sheer luck, we managed to run off the path into a very dark, very overgrown hole in the side of a hill overlooking where we just come from. We decided to hide in the natural dugout of this hill, hoping the plants and darkness would be enough to protect us from whatever was happening out there. We watched our pursuers right up to where we originally were standing. There were 4 men, 2 on 4-wheelers, 2 on motorbikes, each other yelling something, but we can't make out what they're saying due to the distance. We felt safe enough to whisper softly to each other and speculate who these people could have been. Our first thought was that they might be park rangers of some kind, although we've never seen any in here, and we've been here a lot of times. And honestly, we doubted that this country had the budget for them this deep, unless they're on a big manhunt or something, which has happened in neighbouring states. Besides, these men are on vehicles that are inappropriate for paved bike trails. They're very angry too, and we don't know why. They call out for us for a while, yelling things like, "We know you're there, and we can see you, come out." We stay silent and decide to call on their bluffing instead of running. Eventually, I heard one of the men yell, "Find them now," and smash a bottle. That had erased any hope that they're rangers. We watched them split up, and each of them gone a different way down a series of paths on their vehicles, including the one that we've just come from. It took us what felt like ages to move. We're frozen in fear in that dugout, watching the lights from the vehicles travelling through the woods and paths. One of them already come in full circle and passing the point that we started on. I thought about calling for help, but I was too afraid. I was scared that the smallest amount of sound would give away our location. After waiting for the lights of the vehicles to reach our furthest distance yet, we finally summoned the nerve to get up and to run somewhere far enough away from them to make a call. We ran as hard and fast as we can through the woods, since their headlights gave their locations away on the paths. We would hide again whenever we felt like they're close. Our available hiding spots were getting progressively worse as the woodland became less dense, and the fear is overwhelming. Finally though, we emerged from the woods onto the intersection of the 2 main roads, far enough away from where we started. We ducked down into the ditch to call for help. I opened my phone. I noticed I had recent missed calls from one of our friends, Connor, who we're supposed to meet up with after our longboarding excursion. I called him and frantically asked where he is. Luck's with us again, and he hadn't given up on our plans despite us ignoring him. He's only a few miles away now, already heading in our direction. I gave him the names of 2 of the streets we're near. I explained that we need to be picked up immediately. He agrees to speed over to us while Justin and I were waiting and hiding. Thankfully, Connor arrived before any of them men did. We bolted into the back seat of his car, yelling for him to get out of there. He took off fast. Relief doesn't begin to explain how I felt after being safely driven home. After explaining everything that happened to Connor, we ended up just moving on with our night and decided not to call the police. We figured they'd be gone by the time any officer made it out there, and that we're putting ourselves at risk by admitting that we were breaking the law being out there. Justin and I later admitted to each other that when the Reverend started, we could see our minds going to Chainsaw Killer or something worse. Frustratingly enough, Whatever them weird men saw that made them want to chase us so bad, we actually never saw, so they even had no reason to chase us. I never found out what they were actually doing or why they're so angry at us. I just know we're in a very dangerous situation, and to be honest, we're probably lucky to make it out of there alive. Me and my friend John loved to go for hikes in a national park that was a couple of hours drive away from where we lived. We'd often end up camping overnight. We'd always bring our camping gear in case we didn't make it back in time off the trail when it was dark. Now, we usually did this in summer evenings. Oftentimes we'd never encounter anyone else except for the odd park ranger. It was normally nice to see them, and we'd have a good laugh for a little bit. I always respected park rangers and embraced them when I saw them. Now, we set out on this one hike during one summer's evening 2 years ago. We're having a really good time. We're just talking about life. My friend's talking about not really liking his job much, and he's complaining about the hours and the work they have him do. He works in a hospital and really doesn't enjoy it, and I felt pretty bad for him. He's only starting and they're making him do all the dirty work pretty much. I wasn't too happy in my life either at the time. I had some big changes coming, and I was waiting on people, and I hate waiting. I really can't stand it. So we're talking about this for hours, and honestly, it's like a therapy session, and I really enjoy it. We keep walking and we're talking about the highs and lows of life, things that are coming, and things that we just want to see change. We're both saying it's surprising how that this time next year, we have no idea where we're going to be or what we're going to be doing. We're just putting the work in now. As we finish talking, we realise it's nightfall and there's already moonlight illuminating around us. I love moonlight, and we say, hey, how about we set up camp? John agrees. We walk further down, and just as we think we found a good camping spot, we see another tent further up. Now there's this horrible smell there, so we're sure that whoever this is has hunted an animal, and they've left it out there, which is kind of disgusting, but they might be skinning it, getting it ready to eat. My friend goes over to say hello, and just say that not to worry about us, we're going to move further away so he can have his own space. And what do you know? A park ranger appears. You can see his hat from a mile away. As we go over there, we realise that there's something not quite right about this ranger. We can't really tell what. He doesn't have a normal uniform on. Well, he has a hat at least, but he has a big coat on. It's not cold enough for a coat. He says very few words when he speaks to us. He just says, yeah, I'm just setting up camp. We're out looking for someone, and that we should leave. I end up talking to him for a little while, and a lot of what he's saying doesn't make sense, and I get this really weird vibe from him, like he's looking at me but he's not, and he's trying to look through me at the same time, if that makes sense. He says, are we armed? And we say, yeah, we've both got hunting rifles, but we got a permit. He asks to see it, and my buddy shows him his. He says, that's okay, you haven't got to get yours out to me. And then John says that we need to get moving and should probably set up camp. He says fine, and the second he turns around, my buddy John grabs me hard by the arm and starts walking really fast, guiding me. Now I'm confused because, well, we're out in the middle of nowhere in a national park. There's going to be lots of places we can go and set up our camp. But there was something different about the way he grabbed me. It felt really urgent. I can't describe it. I don't need to know any more about the situation, and I just start to lightly jog with him. The second we're away from the camp, I turn back and I can see the ranger still watching us. He's standing in the exact same spot as before though, which is something I find very odd. The second that we get over this hill, John says run, and I don't question it, and we start sprinting as fast as we can back the way we've come. He starts telling me, I don't think that's a park ranger. I say, what? You're kidding me? He says, no, just run. And we run for miles and have to stop eventually to catch up with our breaths. He says, I don't think that was a dead animal we could smell, and that guy definitely wasn't a park ranger. I said, how do you know? He's just wearing a coat. He said when he looked at our permits, he didn't even look. And then he said it was fine, and a park ranger would have to check both of us had permits, pretty much. I got a horrible sinking feeling in my stomach as I remember turning round and looking at the park ranger just standing there staring at us, and a lot of what he said didn't make sense. God, it all clicked now. We continued hiking into the morning and eventually make it back to our car. We drive immediately to the park ranger station, and the park rangers there say that nobody's out in that area and they're definitely not camping. Eventually, they sent out some people to go and investigate and got the police involved. It turned out that they suspect that this guy had murdered someone, and where we encountered him, he moved everything and hid the body. The police are still out there looking for it today. So my first story is actually my friend's story. So during these times, things took place when we were all in high school. I already knew about skinwalkers and the like, but when these things happened to me, I wasn't sure if it really was a skinwalker at the time or something else. I've noticed that most of the people who tell me they've experienced the same phenomenon live in the same area that I do, and my friend is no exception. Let's call him Jay. Jay lives maybe 5 minutes away from me. She told me that in her bus, there's this one area that they drive by to drop this kid off. She said she doesn't know why, but it always gives her the creeps. She told me that one early morning, when they were driving in that area to pick him up, all the kids in the bus saw this deer running alongside the bus. Not away from it, but besides it. She said it looked weird as hell. You know, the usual stuff about appearing humanoid. And it didn't look right. Like its limbs were awkwardly bent in a way that didn't seem human. And its eyes were freaky. This is my friend who doesn't know anything about skinwalkers or anything of that mumbo jumbo. So I basically get chills. I tried being reasonable though, because you know, maybe she just saw a regular deer, and since it was dark out, she just got confused, because it's Florida. We're not supposed to get that kind of thing down here. However, Jay swore up and down that it was not a normal deer. She said they all saw it and the bus driver slowed down to get a better look because everyone was weirded out by it, and it was basically something they've never seen before. After a while it ran off to disappear. Jay could have made this up, but like I said, why would she, and she's never seen anything like it. So anyway, I get freaked out because here I am knowing about this frickin' skinwalker, and my friend is literally clueless, thinking it's just a regular weird animal and she's just had a weird experience. Oh god. I ask her, do you even know what skinwalkers are? She just looked at me and said, what's that? I googled it and showed her the deceptions of skinwalkers, and she said, that's what I saw, but it had the head of a deer. She kept on saying it didn't look human or like an animal. After a while too, the kid from that bus stop didn't come back. Although that doesn't necessarily have anything to do with this, I just thought it was weird. So we were freaking out together, because what she said reminded me about what I heard at night, about it not being animal or human. See, a couple of years back before she told me the story, I found myself one night sitting in my backyard like really early, maybe 3 in the morning or so, because I was thinking about things due to personal reasons. And I'm kind of just chilling and enjoying the silence when all of a sudden I hear this really freaky echoing scream from far away. The only way I can describe it as though that a woman and a cat were trapped together inside of a bag, screaming like they're getting murdered. I know mountain lions, foxes and owls are a thing, and they make the weirdest calls, but I looked up that stuff and it's just not the same. Like, usually you wouldn't be able to tell if it's an animal, right? It's just common sense, like my friend said. But that don't sound like animal or human. It sounded really unnatural and weird. Now, me being me, I was really upset at first. Now, the thing was really far away, and I actually thought that they might even be killing someone in the streets at 3 AM. That thing travelled so fast though. It sounded freaky as hell, and it was getting closer as it got to the more weird and unnatural sound. It only took me a couple of seconds to realise that this isn't a woman and this ain't a cat. Because while this was going down, I was going through it in my head like, what the hell is that thing? The first thing went from sounding like a good couple of miles away to being in my goddamn neighbourhood in 5 seconds. It was so weird because 1 second it sounded far away, and the next it's on my street. I had a heart attack. The second I stood up, the scream just stopped, just like it started. And I'm really thinking at this point that it must be in front of my house. I walk as calmly as possible back inside, locking the doors, and the scream was back again, far away. I also heard some scraping and tapping sounds on my windows, but it happens at the same time now. I'd say 2 to 4 o'clock in the morning, and seen some black figures that aren't really affected by light outside of my house. To add detail to those things so you can get a feel for it, basically what happened is that I was doing a project for class, and since I procrastinate like I'm a pro up until 2 AM, I go to wash my hands from all the graphite, and the water's running while I hear a scraping sound against one of the bedroom doors that leads to my backyard. Now, most of the door is made up of these glass panes, the kind that make everything appear distorted and like blobby ash lumps. But then I see something pointy, dark against the window, almost looking ghost-like. I turn off the water and wait a bit, and it comes back and scrapes against the window again. I'm not trying to freak out, but my hands are shaking. It's stupid, but I actually whisper, "What are you doing?" while my voice trembled, and it stopped. I stop, and I don't hear anything except for what sounded like somebody walking by the window to the house every now and then. It continued that way for some nights too. Off and on, I would be hearing footsteps by my window, and even a tap on the window. Sometimes I ignored them, and other times I look out to see who's there, but I never see anyone. Another night I'd been outside in my backyard again, after having a rough day. It was maybe 3 or so AM in the morning. I'm sitting outside on the trampoline relaxing. I suddenly notice it's quiet, like kind of uneasy silence that feels like a vacuum. I get this feeling of dread like I'm being watched, and I snap my head to the left and catch a glimpse of a humanoid dark figure under the side of my fence immediately. I'm a little freaked out because I notice that this thing is pure black. The streetlight hits it, but didn't do anything at all. It almost looked cartoony, if that makes any sense, because it's like the laws of physics don't apply to this thing. See, the reason I'm ranting about this is that I told both my friends my own story in psychology class at the same time. A lot of kids there live around my area. I mean like 5 to 15 max away. And they all start screaming. And the entire class went crazy when I finished because apparently they've all experienced the exact same thing as me. One girl told me about also hearing the tapping on her window at night. Another one told me about a really dark figure that seemed to follow her at night time, also screaming from the woods. Pretty much everyone's heard the screaming. It sounded the same, but that's the thing. In completely different time frames. That's the weird part because everyone's voice sounds different. So how could she describe the same thing I did? You know, like, if people were really killing each other out there, none of us thought it was an animal either. We all agreed from that point our town is pretty haunted, but I don't know. I mean, if there's any animal that sounded like that, I want to know, because that didn't sound like anything I've ever heard before. I want to be enlightened, I want it to be something normal, but I just don't think it can be. The only person I heard of who's seen anything remotely specific is my friend's best friend from art school who went on the bus, and apparently, like, it's really bad to talk about skinwalkers, and even worse, if you see them, it's like bad mojo. These things are said to be able to travel very quickly, so thinking about that made it seem like we experienced a skinwalker. Okay, so I had this saved in my notes for a while, but today I just asked my co-worker, who was also my friend in high school who lives nearby. He got all spooked and said that he's heard and seen the same things, but he's very spiritual and often has visions. He told me that he believes they're doing dark magic in the woods because of a dream he had about some hooded up group sacrificing a woman and a cat. Which is freaky because it also turns out that behind our local dog park, there's a patch of woods with dodgy stuff going down there. I was shown this by an acquaintance during my freshman year who lives a couple of streets away. Down the path in the woods, after some time of walking, there's this huge cross smack bang in the middle of nowhere. It's basically raw. Some crooked old nails struck together with a rope hanging from where you'd put your hands to be crucified. It's huge too, and whenever I decide to check it out, I have this horrible feeling like I don't want to be there or something bad's gonna happen. Anyway, he says I'm not the first person that he knows has told him about experiencing these things. He's also had his experience while there with humanoid figures. He says that he saw one turn around and look at him, directly in the eyes as though it's trying to intimidate him before vanishing. So we basically don't mess with anything in the woods near me. My father died about 5 years ago, unexpectedly from a heart attack. To say it was hard on my mother would be an understatement. Our old house in Knoxville just didn't feel the same anymore, and about a year later, my mum and I made plans to take ourselves and an elderly dog, Ace, to move further south to a small town situated about half an hour from Atlanta. Just a few days before we slated to move, I had one of the most vivid dreams I've ever come to experience. All that was within my dream was my bedroom, a picture-perfect recreation of the real thing. I sometimes wonder if it was a sleep paralysis. To further add to the dream's realism, in the middle of the night, the street lights come on across the street that illuminate my window, creating a reflection on the wall perpendicular. In my dream, as I lay there, staring at the exact reflection on the wall, I saw an orb of smoke fade in from the shadows. Goosebumps chill across my skin as I lay there panicked, afraid to move a muscle. Suddenly it stopped moving and steadily hung in the light's reflection as though staring at me. Without a warning, it spoke to me in my dad's voice. "I'm sending something to watch you." Despite hearing my father's voice from the orb, I'm terrified, and I don't know why. "What?" I whisper. The orb remains silent, leaving an eerily dead silence in the voice. "Damn, black." I woke up almost instantaneously. I'm gasping for breath now. The nightmare had chilled me to my core. I didn't know exactly what to make of it, especially the final words. I chalked it up to my dad wishing well on us maybe, but I couldn't shake the feeling. With the next couple of weeks, my mum and I moved out of Knoxville and headed down to South Georgia. She had managed to find a quaint little house for us. It had only 1 or 2 neighbours down there, and it's down the middle of a long gravel road in the middle of the woods. Nice for us. Probably the best reliever of all my stresses came with the move, however, was our neighbour's cat. She was a petite, older black cat that gravitated towards me almost instantly, and I treated her as though she's my own. I left out a can of food once or twice a week for her. Even if I didn't call out for her, when she saw me outside, she'd run up to me, helping ease my tensions. Less than a month into our new house, I suddenly awoken to a faint coughing that sounded like it is coming from downstairs. The important thing to know about our dog is that he has a collapsed trachea. He needs medicine to calm the condition down. So I'm used to walking up in the middle of the night to get his medicine. I proceed downstairs from my bedroom to give him his cough medicine, but I couldn't find him anywhere through the house. He wasn't in his bed sleeping, and he wasn't in the kitchen. I mean, literally nowhere to be found. I didn't check my mum's room, however, as I didn't want to wake her up. Besides, I wouldn't have heard the coughing if he had been in there anyway, so I just let it be. That's when I heard the coughing again, but it was coming from further away. It's outside now. I look over to the side door patio leading to the woodlands, and realised I'd forgotten to shut it. There it stood, slightly ajar. He got out. I immediately ran outside with a flashlight and started calling out for my dog. "Ace! Ace!" I shouted out into the neighbouring woods. I heard another cough and shined my light in its direction. That time, it had echoed from down the gravel road. I swear, a path had never looked so terrifyingly desolate before in my life. I stared down that long gravel road that led us to our new home, but in that moment, I thought my dog was lost, and chalk it up to the new house jitters. I go, "Ace, come on," pressing on. But then I heard it, the cough I'd been following, almost right beside me, but this time, it didn't stay a dry cough like it had been before. Instead, it slowly descended into a low growl. I shine my light towards the sound. there stood a bright red fox in the middle of the path. For a moment, I figure it's the fox that I'd mistaken for my dog. The whole time, as I was processing what I was seeing, it stared directly at me, its eyes glowing. However, our stare was broke when it tilted its head to the right, looking down, and there was our neighbour's little black cat staring beside me. However, it had completely changed its persona, no longer happy, affectionate, not the cat I knew. Instead, it arched its back upright, every fibre of her hair standing uneasily, uttering the lowest growl I've ever heard from a feline. In that moment, I figured she's just scared of the fox, so I knelt down beside her in a bid to coax her away and avoid fox hunting her. But no matter how many times I tried to coax her out of fight mode, she wouldn't. That's when I looked towards the direction of the fox once more, but there wasn't a fox anymore. Instead, in the exact same spot of the gravel road, was a walking, rotten corpse of a coyote roadkill, slowly moving towards me. It took a step back. I'm absolutely mortified of what I'm seeing. Its jaws hanging loose, eyes are blood-stained, wobbling now. I rub my eyes in disbelief, hoping I'm imagining it. But it was there, and it was real. And despite what was in front of us, the black cat just kept on growling at me. Suddenly, it stopped. The creature had ceased its walk towards me. For a moment, it just stood there, glancing back and forth between myself and this little black cat that was trying to defend me, I now realise. That's when I mistakenly heard this beast mutter two words almost. Damn black. In a flash, the creature ran straight into the woods. I shined my flashlight in its direction, but it's completely vanished. Even the brush it came from looked untouched. That's when the cat standing behind me calmed herself down. Almost as though nothing happened, she rubbed herself against my leg, returning to normal, now in a very loving state and manner. Despite technically not being mine, I scoop her up and run back inside the house and upstairs with the little black cat snuggled up in my arms. I decide to poke my head into my mum's room. Lying on the floor, sound asleep, is Ace, who had been here the whole time. I quietly close her door before bolting upstairs, making sure the little cat slept with me that night. From the research I've done, I am almost certain that I was a victim of a Skinwalker. Okay, I posted a Skinwalker encounter yesterday. I found it helped me, getting it off my chest and out into the open. Now this story goes into some of the details about injuries. The details are not too bad in my opinion, but you've had your warning. Now for some background, I was 16, around 2016 when this happened. I live in Massachusetts, which is where this happened. The day starts normally. I went to school, had a test in vet tech, and I took the bus home. Both my parents were at work like normal, but after 3 hours when my mum should have been home, I got worried. Around 5 PM, I got a phone call from my dad who told me that my mum's in a car accident and they're both in the hospital and they're gonna be there for a while. It got very late, almost 10, and my parents weren't home, so I decided to put my younger brothers to bed. I stayed up waiting for my parents to get home. I spent my time reading and writing an essay for school until around 1 in the morning. I got a call from my dad who said that he wasn't coming home. He was staying in a motel that was closer to the hospital. I just got off the phone and finished that part of the essay that I was on. I gathered my stuff and walked through the kitchen, heading towards the stairs that leads upstairs when a terrifying loud moaning screeches through my ears. The moaning came from outside. I mean, it's super loud, but would stop occasionally. Like whatever it was had a voice crack, almost sounding pained. I turn on the outside light to see an ugly sight. Sitting in the yard just feet from my house is a coyote, horribly injured. Its head's caved in, its paws bleeding. This was evident by the pool of blood. It appeared that it had a long, deep gash all down its back. I reach in my pocket going for my phone, only to realise I left it on the table I'd been working on. Oh God. I turn and rush back to the table. I was planning on calling a local vet clinic that I knew was open 24/7. When I reached the table, the moaning got much louder and more pained. Then it stopped. I grabbed my phone and ran back to the window. At first I was confused as hell. The coyote's gone, replaced by a common tabby cat. It was odd. The cat was sitting in exactly the same place that the coyote was sitting in. Weird. After the initial shock, I noticed that the tabby cat had the exact same injuries. Same part of the head caved in, same bleeding and gashes. Now I couldn't pinpoint the difference for a good few minutes, but then I realised that on the right shoulder blade it is exactly the same. I dropped my phone. As soon as my phone hit the floor, the cat starts meowing loudly. I'm now stuck here terrified as it meows at me. It's not even blinking. After a good 10 minutes, I slowly pick up my phone off the floor. I straighten back up and look out the window, and the cat's gone. It had only gone for a few seconds, and in that short time, it vanished. Some unknowing feeling come over me. I don't know what it was. Worry for the animal? Curiosity? Maybe. Hell, it might have been something that the animal made me feel. I have no clue. Now outside, I first walked to the blood puddle and looked for a trail of blood, and I found it. I started to follow the trail and found that it ended as soon as it got past the gates. To make sure that I just couldn't see it in the dark, I pulled out my phone and illuminated the ground. I looked for 5 minutes and don't find anything. Like the cat and trail had vanished. I called the veterinary clinic and they sent out a car. They look around for things, but they can't find anything. At the time I didn't think anything of this, but thereafter I realised there's no trail of blood leading to my house. I have no idea what this thing was. None of my searches have come up with anything. I'm honestly completely dumbfounded as to what this creature was. I only hope it wasn't a Skinwalker attacking these. My wife and I were driving through the northern part of Arizona on Highway 89 between Flagstaff and Page. It's about 1 AM, as we're on the third shift at the time and often drove at night to avoid traffic. I saw a few set of eyes glowing in my headlights a little ways up the road, so I let off the gas, slowing down to avoid hitting an animal in the road. When we drove by, we see several dogs or coyotes on the side of the road, and I hit the gas and drove by. After we passed, my wife said, "One of them was running next to my car," and I looked over and saw it, probably 20 feet off the shoulder of the road. I floored it, and I see that it stood up on its own hind legs and kept pace with us for a couple of seconds before turning away from the road and disappearing. The whole event probably lasted no more than 15 seconds, but God, it is the most terrifying 15 seconds of my life. This was probably 20 years ago, and we still rarely talk about it. We live in a rural community on the Navajo reservation. My aunt and her two brothers were home alone while my grandparents had left for the evening to attend a chapter house meeting. They were in the house, and like many people from the reservation, they don't have electricity, and like many people there, they've been outside in the dark for about an hour, and my aunts and uncles are getting ready for bed. Outside, they hear noises, as though someone is moving things around them. My oldest uncle then went outside to see what's going on, and he saw a figure outside the truck. This was immensely out of the ordinary because the closest neighbour is miles away. Whatever it was opened the truck door and began to dig through personal items. My uncles and aunts were frightened by the sight and knew they must take action. They took out the rifle and steadied themselves to hold it up. They flung open the door, aiming the gun at the figure in the dark. They're shaken at this point. The figure then turned and starts towards them, totally unfazed by the weapon. My uncle pulled the trigger, but nothing happens. The figure drew closer and my aunt began to smell something like a rotten corpse. It's so strong she began to gag. My uncle continued to pull the trigger, no luck. The figure came closer and closer, but now, off in the distance, headlights are approaching. My grandparents are returning. The figure looks towards the lights and starts to move away and tucks itself behind a tree near the home. My oldest uncle ran towards a truck with the gun. My grandfather got out of the car and my uncle pointed to the tree. That thing was poking out its head to observe what they're doing. My grandfather ran into the house and over to the stove, grabbing a handful of ashes and rubbing it over the gun, and placed an ash-covered bullet to the chamber. He walked out onto the porch and fired towards a tree. Whatever that thing was did not expect the gun to go off. The gunshot echoed, and the figure began running. My grandpa chased my aunt inside, and my uncles and grandfather went after it. There weren't many roads or paths, so as my grandfather and uncles chased after the figure, the truck was bouncing and the headlights were not fixed on one particular spot. My uncle swears that whenever the headlights would hit, the figure he saw a woman. Not only that, whatever it was running on its fours like a bear. My grandfather must stop now as they're nearing a ditch with a 30 feet drop. He got out and began to yell in Navajo. My uncle says that he was yelling about a local woman. He yelled that he wasn't scared and he knew it was her to leave the family alone. After a few days, there was the news that the woman that my grandfather was yelling about had passed. I've always been told that if you know who the Skinwalker is, say their name and it will kill them. Out on the Navajo reservation, we don't have the city come and collect our trash, so we have to burn the trash out in these huge burning barrels. Not very eco-friendly, I know, but it's what we have to do. Now if you don't light the trash properly, the fire will go out and the trash will sit in the barrel. This is important because we are told to dispose of personal hygiene items, If you removed all your hair from your brush, make sure the trash burned. If it was that time, you had to make sure everything was burned. They tell us things because skinwalkers have been known to dig through trash in order to find out things they can use against us. They use the things that were briefly connected to bring misfortune onto others. Some of my family members take part in the sport of rodeo, so to practice, they have a dummy rope and throw it at things and try to bring them in. My two male cousins were enjoying themselves outside, taking turns swinging the rope at the fake calf. The elders are always adamant that we shouldn't stay out past sundown, where that it's pitch black for miles. But my cousins aren't superstitious and are under streetlight. My cousins are joking and laughing, having a great time. That changes when the oldest cousin looks over to a burn barrel. A dark figure is bent over, rummaging through the garbage that's failed to burn. My cousins devise a plan that they're gonna grab weapons and chase it. They move strategically so that they are able to flank the figure. They run full speed at it and begin yelling and swinging. My cousin states that they kept this up for the most part, until the figure ran under the streetlight. But that's when my cousins see that what they thought was actually a person is actually a goat. Why would they think it is a person? The goat was running on its hind legs. Fear runs through their bodies as the figure runs off into the darkness. Now feeling nervous, and not entirely accepting what they've just seen, they began roping the dummy again. There's an awkward silence amongst the boys who just saw something unnatural, but talking about it now would just make it seem real. The boys roped in silence until one of them looked over to a tree. There's a head peeking out at them. If they didn't pay attention to it, whatever it was would poke its head out from the tree to stare. When they would look in the direction of the tree, it would move quickly out of sight. This was the final straw. My cousins ran back into the house. They told their parents my uncle come out. It was still there, poking its head from behind a tree. My uncle loaded up his gun and starts walking towards the tree line. He aimed it and pulled the trigger. Gun jammed. Whatever it was began to run so fast it appeared to be a blur. When it left, my uncle came in and gave the boys a thorough lecture about staying out late. One of my cousins then told my uncle that whatever it was had been digging through the trash barrel. They went to investigate the creature that's hauled a lot of things out of the barrel, which was odd. There were tracks all around the area. They followed the tracks, but they suddenly vanish, dead in the middle of nowhere, with no possible way they could have went. The Navajo Reservation is the largest reservation in the United States. It goes into New Mexico, Utah, Colorado, and Arizona. This story takes place in the northeast region of Arizona, near Indian Wells. This was told by people from around that area. If you're heading west on State Highway 15, out towards Dilton, you come to a stretch of road that goes into a small valley. I remember going down this road in my youth. If you ever looked at the horizon, it would seem as if the road kept going. Then suddenly your car would be pulled down by gravity as though being followed by the road. It would always give me butterflies when we would get to the drop. When I heard about this story, it made my stomach feel different. A man was driving home one night and it's very late. It was a drive that he had done before, so he wasn't bothered by it. When you're driving on the reservation, sometimes there isn't any way to keep cattle from getting on the road. No fences means that you need to be extra aware. I always get told to look out for black horses. If you see a black horse, then you'll be able to see anything else that may wander into the path of your vehicle. So this man is driving home, not really paying much attention. He drives down the slope, but when he gets to the bottom of the valley, he sees it. He doesn't have time to react. Suddenly, a horse comes out of the darkness. He slams his brakes but can't stop. The impact is enough to deploy the airbags. The man is tossed around a bit. He turns on the emergency lights and gets out of the car to assess damage. The front of the car is crumpled and one of the headlights is destroyed. He cursed out loud. This was the worst place to have an accident. He didn't have signal for help. Then he thinks of the horse. This man went into his cab and got a small keychain flashlight. He starts shining around looking for the animal. He heard noises, but they don't sound like a horse. But he was absolutely positive that he hit a horse. As he approaches the sounds, he could see the animal's fur moving from its ragged breathing. As he got closer, he began to realize what it was. An elderly woman wrapped in a large spelt. She was moaning from pain. The man stopped dead in his tracks due to fear. He stumbled back to his truck. Although it suffered plenty of damage, he was able to drive off. Once he got signal again, he called the authorities. An ambulance drove out there and recovered her. She's then driven to the local care facility. Due to the fact that many of the healthcare staff were Navajo, no one wanted to touch the woman. The woman known in the community was thought to be bedridden. This was shocking because she was so far from home, and the state she was in was off-putting. She had on her attire when she arrived. The nurses called her family to come in. When she got there, they removed her jewelry. When her family got there, they were frightened. But there was some non-Navajo staff in there that provided care. She only had bumps and scrapes, which didn't make any sense at all. She's able to get up and walk around the same evening. She went home with her family that night, but apparently vanished after a few days. In Navajo culture, if you find out who a Skinwalker is, you have the power to destroy them. After the community around India Wells found out, or more fittingly who she was, it was certain that her end come. I had pet rabbits as a kid. They lived outside in a cage, a really big cage inside like a bigger shed, so they had a pretty good life. But I went out with my older sister to feed them. At the time we were about 5 or 7. On the way out to the cage, we both saw what appeared to be a really tall man running inhumanly fast through our backyard. We live in what is basically a swamp, and had to have cleared this giant downed tree and run over mud and ferns. But regardless, he seems to be going through at least 20 miles per hour. We both dropped what we had and bolt inside. At the time our parents are able to convince us it's a deer. We wanted to believe them, but it just wasn't. I convinced myself for over a decade that that's what we saw. Fast forward to a few years ago, I was at a park near my house with my friend late at night. I pulled into the dirt road drive in my Outback and parked facing the old practice fence. Now we go to the field that was too foggy to see across, except for a split second. We can see what appeared to be a very tall man running across the field. We drove as fast as that Subaru could take us out that park. Now a couple of years ago, I was at the same park under similar circumstances. This time, it was clear but very windy. Now from across the field and into a field, we heard a crash and a scream. Not a crash then a scream, but simultaneous. It was the most shrill, terrifying, god-awful screech I've ever heard. More human than a fisher cat, but far louder and more sinister. Again, we noped it out of there as quick as possible. So for context, I live in southern Maryland on a large plot of land. We have 3 large farm dogs, 2 of whom are German shepherds. They're very used to the various animals that pursue our property, and very rarely get spooked or upset. We also have lots of livestock, and it's uncommon for us to lose a random animal or find a pile of chicken feathers in the corner of our property. However, we've always been able to explain it or add extra protection for our flocks. Around 8 months ago, we started losing chickens at an alarming rate. They would disappear. Even our shepherds couldn't send them anywhere on the property. For a while, we figured it's just a barred owl or some other bird of prey. The main problem with that theory is that literally 10 would disappear at a time rather than the normal 1 or 2. We decided to put a trail cam up to watch our most eastern flock. Almost immediately, the problem stopped, so we took them down. But then it got stranger. I've always gotten sleep paralysis, and it's like to believe I'm pretty comfortable with my sleep paralysis demon. It's never really been something to concern me. However, around the same time as we started losing chickens, I would see something different in my sleep paralysis. Whereas my demon would chill in the corner and not move, this thing would hang around and move back and forth, almost like a sloth. It had long fingers and was really skinny, like, weirdly. It didn't appear human. I then noticed it constantly stared at me, whatever part of the room I was in. At the time, I decided not to worry though, and figure it's just anxiety. Which brings us up to September 2018. One night at around 2, I woke up completely able to move my body. Everything seemed normal. No one else was sleeping in the house that night, but that's pretty standard around that time of year. I glanced up at my rafters and saw the long-fingered thing moving and looking at me. Immediately I turn on my bed lamp. It's gone, yet again. I talk it up to stress and decide to go downstairs to grab a cup of water. All of our dogs are happily asleep, and I went back to bed turning off the light. The second it was dark, I could see it again, without my eyes having to adjust. This freaked me out enough, but all of a sudden I heard a Rottweiler get up and start growling. He barks and growls. I call out, but he kept going. He got louder and louder until the other dogs joined in. Now, I turned the light back on, grabbing my hunting rifle. I went downstairs and took 2 of the dogs outside, and I swear to God, I've never heard a silent night like it. I moved my flashlight slowly around the perimeter looking for the shine of eyes, or anything. All of a sudden, the chickens are going haywire. Like so loud they distract the dogs, who sprinted out towards them. I followed them only to find no chickens, and our fence is torn down. There's no animals in the area that could even try to do that, so we quickly get inside and camped out for the evening. It was quiet after that, and when the morning came, the chickens are safely back home. I stupidly figured the problem solved and decided not to worry about it. The only thing was that I started seeing the long-fingered rafter thing every time I turned out the lights. Eventually I get so freaked out, I decide to call a shaman. She told us that we have a Wendigo problem, that she would come and sage the house. We opened every single window and door, letting her do her thing, but since then, we've had no problems. The issue now is that when we walk our dogs at night, or put the chickens inside, I swear someone's watching me. I've had a couple of other people bring up that they feel weird at night, and nobody goes outside alone anymore. Whenever we walk our dogs at night, they get so paranoid and don't want to move, especially not towards the forest. The creepiest part though is sometimes at night, we hear screaming. We assume it's often coyotes, but every once in a while, it's just off enough that we get scared. A couple of times it's been a lone shriek, which is very uncommon for foxes or coyotes, and a few nights ago, we were asleep in bed when we heard a scream from directly outside our window. My partner says that he's worried that someone was hurt, so he opened our window and yells, "Is anyone out there?" And we hear a lot of shuffling like somebody scrambling off. It sounded heavier than a bird of prey, but way lighter than a person. Our dog stopped barking, and within a minute, we hear another scream a good mile away. This happened just over 2 years ago, at the end of my first year of university. I'm female, and at the time was 21. My university's in a very large city, and I was living in university accommodation, a short walk from the main campus. My flatmates had all finished their exams and gone home for the summer, so I was alone in my flat. I was pretty stressed because I was in the middle of my first round of university exams and decided that it wouldn't be prudent to waste my precious study time cooking, so I ordered pizza. It was about 8:30 in the evening when my pizza arrived, so it was on the verge of getting dark. My block of flats had a keycard entry system, so the pizza delivery guy couldn't come right into my door. I saw his car pull up outside, and I go down to get my pizza. The delivery guy stepped out of his car as I walk over. Now he's tall, stocky, and looked to be in his late 20s or early 30s, and hands me the pizza. I say thanks, making my way out. However, he had other ideas, saying, "You're very pretty." I don't know how to respond, so I said thanks again. Then he said, "Are you home alone?" This set off my creep alarm straight away. I say no, I'm not. However, my order was clearly meant for one person, and I was in a largely deserted block of flats at the very end of the school year, so he very easily deduced that I was actually lying. I was thoroughly creeped out by this point, so I turned around to walk back to the door. As I walk away, he wolf whistled after me saying, "Wow, you look good." As I walk up the steps, he continued to whistle and whoop and generally be inappropriate. Needless to say, I close the door and lock them as quick as I can, then moving on to my bedroom. Had this happened to me more recently, I would have called the pizza place right away to report the incident. At the time though, I wasn't in the best mindset, so I ate my pizza and focused on my exams. The next few days passed without incident, and I finished my exams and went back to my parents' house for the summer. When I arrived home, I decided that I ought to call the pizza place to report this. I did, and a young woman answered the phone, sounding horrified when I explained the situation. Apparently this guy was a total creep and had done so before and actually got kicked out for it. To set the scene, I live on the outskirts of a town at the end of a terraced house, and there are lots of houses in my area, in front and beyond. I was home alone. My boyfriend was over his friends. At this time, we didn't really lock the front door. If one of us was in the house, now I do. Nothing really happened when we lived there. We had 3 decent sized dogs that were pretty savage when they had to be, and we were a bit naive. And to be fair, I had recently moved in here with my boyfriend, and before I lived in a small village. So I was sat there in my pyjamas, watching TV with all the dogs next to me when the door knocks. It was about 10 PM, and I'm in my pyjamas, so I'm a bit annoyed. I got the dogs off me and walk out to the living room and pull the living room door closed, keeping the dogs in. Bear in mind, this all took place within 10 seconds, and as I approach the door, it swings open and this man that I've never seen before storms in, getting right in my face. I'm literally frozen in shock. The man says, "Who do you think you are?" And I'm in silence. "You think you can run around here and do what you want, causing trouble? You don't care. You think I'm a muppet. I saw you and your little friends running back into this house." I say, "I'm literally stood here in my pyjamas. I haven't been outside." "Yeah, okay, you think I was born yesterday?" And he literally begins screaming. He stares at me for what feels like forever, probably a couple of seconds, then quickly sprinting out till I'm in the door shut. I was stood there shaking for seconds before I start to get mad when I realise what's happened. I lock the door and ring up my boyfriend straight away, who gets home in about a minute flat. But the group was nowhere to be seen. We didn't call the police. I didn't want to cause any more commotion. Now it's been 7 years since that happened, and I've not bumped into this person since, or the others with him outside. I again thank God I haven't, and always keep the door locked now. This took place when I was 12. I live in a suburban neighbourhood. Our house is beside railway tracks, so because of this, teenagers will walk along the tracks at night and climb over the railings into backyards. Most of the time they're only playing around or exploring, so there's no trouble with them. But sometimes there's more malicious people coming off the tracks. I was home alone when this took place. It's about 1:20, and it was very dark outside. I was watching TV in my room. I heard my house phone ring, but I let it go to voicemail because I wasn't bothered to answer it. 2 minutes later, the phone rang again. This time, I went to go answer it, just in case it was urgent, as it was 1 AM. When I picked up the phone and said hello, I had no answer. I say hello again, so I hung up. I think, it's probably just a stupid scam call. When I was back settled in my room and watching TV, I heard a rattling sound from outside. I hear it again, so I look out my window thinking it was probably just teenagers trying to jump over the fence. Except, there wasn't a group of teenagers. It was just a guy trying to get over the fence, torch in mouth. I knew this was shady, but I don't know what to do. I didn't call the police, I just watched him. The man finally gets over the fence. I couldn't see his face, but he was pointing his flashlight at various things in my yard. Everything valuable, such as bikes. They were keeping away in a locked shed, so I knew he would just get bored and walk away. But he didn't. He hung around in the garden for a couple of minutes and then went towards the kitchen door. From my bedroom, I could hear the handle of the back door being messed with. My heart sunk as I remembered that I left my phone in the kitchen, and that's the only way I can call the police. I then heard him bang his fist on the door loudly, but it stops just as suddenly as it starts. I look out my window and hear him scream, and watch him jump back over the fence, turning off the flashlight, disappearing into the abyss of darkness. I'm not quite sure what happened that day, but from that point on, I brought my phone with me everywhere I've went. So my husband is in the military. We have generally lived on bases every station we've been to because the surrounding towns can be very crime ridden and sketchy, with my husband mostly on overtime security. I work from home due to us moving so often, so one afternoon I was taking a break, had made a bite and was snuggling up on the couch with my dog. That's when I heard the sliding glass door open. It was so nonchalant that I think it's my husband. I saw my cat run from the kitchen, and a shadow standing near, not entering. I thought that maybe he's come back, so I call out for him and say, "What are you doing home? You forget something." And there's no answer. This is when I get this eerie feeling. After I ask what he's doing here, I saw the shadow move and heard the click of the sliding door lock. From there, he walked to the laundry room and shut the door. I've still got no response. Sitting on my couch, scared out of my mind, I call out to my husband, hoping he's near his phone. I don't hear a ring, but he answers. I ask him why he came home, and all he says is, "Grab your dog, get in the car now." After getting off the phone, I grab the dog and sprint to it. From there I call the MP. Waiting for them was probably the longest 20 minutes of my life. When they got there, they clear the house and find no one. They asked me to take a statement, and even though they're baffled, they do their best to help. The thing is, we're still on that base. I'm petrified that he's gonna return. This happened in the early thousands, and I was around 12 years old. My dad had passed away about 2 years before leaving my mum, sister and myself. To help me cope with my father's passing, my mum took me to the animal shelter to pick out a dog, since a large dog was something I always wanted. In one of the cages was a small shepherd/husky huddled in the corner that I fell in love with. When the incident happened, he was about 190 pounds and my best friend. Now when the incident occurred, my mum worked on nights and my older sister was taking advantage that my mum wasn't home and would constantly leave me alone. I didn't mind though, because then she couldn't boss me around, since when she was home she would try to be mum, telling me what to do and when to go to bed. We lived in a small middle class suburban area with a low crime rate. It was so low that I wasn't scared to be home alone. I was sitting in the living room playing video games and got up, heading to the kitchen to grab a drink. In the kitchen, I had a clear view through the back door and could see the garage open. Thinking that I just left it open after putting my bike away, I head out to the door to close it. My dog is sleeping in the basement since he liked to lay on the cool floor during the summers. I step out to the door and make it about 5 feet from it when I notice a darkness crouching shadow moving in the garage. I froze, trying to get my eyes to adjust to the darkness. It finally hit me when I saw the figure stand up and turn towards me. I was terrified and felt like I had been glued to the spot. I knew that this person could see me since the back porch light's on. At that moment, the figure starts running towards me. I was too scared to move and let out a yelp, then a scream. But that was all it took for my dog to hear, and the next thing I knew, he was behind me snarling and growling. I can make out it was a man, but no features when he now froze seeing this 90-pound beast behind me. He turned and ran, straight towards the back fence. My dog is in close pursuit. The guy made it to the fence, and since it was only 4 feet, he hopped over before the dog got him. After he got away, my dog came running back to me, and we went inside where I barricaded the doors. I don't know why I didn't call the cops and never told my mum or sister what happened. One thing that bothered me was that he had to have known I was inside since the lights are on and the blinds are open. So that's why the risk to hit a house when somebody was clearly home. The next morning after my mum was home, I went outside to finally close the garage and noticed that he had been going through my dad's toolbox. I locked up the garage and never told anyone about what happened. I then walked my dog to McDonald's and got him a burger and ice cream cone for being my hero. Okay, so this just happened last night, and it's just kept me awake all night and I can't stop thinking about it, so please let me share it. Let me just explain the setup, what's going on. So we have only been living here for a little over 3 months, and my window is the only window out of the entire house that has a view of the backyard, and it's also right next to our very squeaky back door, meaning I always hear when someone comes in and out. Okay, so now to my story. So my family went out to run errands last night, leaving me home alone trying to catch up on my classes, because you know how college life is. Well, it was all going well for the first hour, until I hear the back gate open and shut. At first I think, oh, they must be back, thinking my family's there, but then I thought again that it probably isn't them. I remember we have a front door, and there's no reason for them to come through the back, so I sit still as long as I possibly can and listen. I start to hear the sound of crunching leaves as though someone's stepping on them, but I can also hear that they're now trying to move slowly. At this point, they're right under my window. I know this because we have a couch located right underneath it, and I hear someone actually sit on it and let out a quick grunt, which also let me know that it's a man who's doing this. I'm feeling extremely paranoid now. At this point, I'm completely freaking out, not even being able to move at all because there's literally someone sitting under my window, and I sit there motionless for like 2 minutes until I start to hear it. Tap, tap, tap. He's tapping on the window. They start out like light little taps. With each set of taps he adds more weight. I feel my eyes growing wider and wider, and immediately I feel like I'm gonna pass out, and still I can't move. It's like I'm paralyzed with fear. It still keeps on going, tap tap tap, until finally I manage to snap out of it. Quickly grabbing some shorts and a tank top, I grabbed my keys and ran out of the front door into a 30-degree weather night, which, in my defense, was definitely not the smartest thing to do, as who knows if he was alone, or if he had more people waiting out the front to catch me. I don't know, I didn't care though. I hopped into my car and drove off, parked at Walmart nearby, and sit there in shock, not even believing what's happened. I then finally reached for my phone, and see my hands are shaking really bad, but I managed to call my parents. As soon as I hear my dad's voice, I burst out crying. I wasn't even able to tell him what had happened. I just could not calm down. Even 5 minutes later, I was still crying, but eventually managed to tell them what happened when they arrived. I was terrified to go back, and even waited in the car until my dad came back from the yard after inspecting it and said whoever was there is gone. We also debated about calling the police, but I honestly didn't think anything could have been done out of it since I didn't even have a face to give a report to. I'm still terrified that they're gonna come back, and I don't feel safe whenever I'm left in the house all alone. I've been trying to distract myself all day, but now I'm just too shaken up to even enjoy my day. I just hope I can forget about the whole incident. It's the summer of '95. I was 11, sleeping home around 10 to 11 AM while my parents were at work. I get woken up by the doorbell, so I instinctively hurry up and down the corridor. But before I rush to open the door as I normally would, I remembered that many times my mum scolded me for opening the door without asking who is it first, or looking through the spy hole to make sure it's safe to open. Especially after some previous creepy experiences have already taken place by now. I say who is it, but all I hear is some unintelligible mumble. So I brought a chair, stepped on it to look through the hole. We live in an apartment building, and on the right of our door was the elevator, and then the staircase. Since the staircase windows were on the far left corner, there was not enough natural light to help me see who it is. I just saw a male with some colourful t-shirts standing outside. I repeat the question, and then strain to hear the answer. He said he was looking for my mother's maiden surname, and I said she's at work. To give you some context, both of my parents are doctors. I don't know if that sounds weird for people in the US or the rest of the Western world, but in Eastern Europe, in the 19s, it wasn't uncommon for grateful patients to sometimes stop by wanting to give thanks by bringing fresh fruit or vegetables, etc. So the man said he was bringing something for my mum, except in the murky light, I could see his hands are empty. I asked where it is, and he said, "The package? That's at the stairs." At this point, I'm starting to get this uneasy feeling that something's not right. So I decide to be cautious and lie to him, saying that I don't have keys. I said my parents are at work and they've told me not to open the door to strangers, so when they come back, they'll help him. He started to get agitated and said he can't wait that long, and then says that he is actually bringing meat, so it's gonna get spoiled. I start to hesitate because I'm thinking, what if he's telling the truth? Do I get in trouble? But then I look through the spy hole again and see his hair. This means that his ears pressed against the door listening in. That spooks me and I say, "I'm sorry, I can't help you, please go away and come back later when I'm not alone." He once again says that he does not have time to go back and forth, so offers to leave and says he'll leave with the package at the stairs. So when he's gone, I'm not afraid to open the door and get it. Now this terrifies me, but I remain quiet and intently observe him as he goes down the stairs and makes noises of climbing down. And then I freeze, because in the silence that ensued, I was just about to really open the door and check when I saw part of the frickin' t-shirt sleeve above the corner of the stairs. He's hiding there, probably thinking that I know he's gone. What was he gonna do? Pounce on me, break in, or worse? I get so scared that I just froze, and I kept on watching, standing on the chair behind the door. And finally, after what felt like hours, I hear him actually descending the stairs. I didn't open the door. I called my mum's hospital, but I can't get through. Great. They both got worried, but proud at the same time I did the right thing. A few hours later, I and all the kids from the building are at the little square playground area in front of it. It was buzzing with kids running around, with grandpas etc., so it's safe. My best friend Nina and I are sitting on one of the benches when suddenly a strange man approaches us and stands next to the bench, saying, "Are you in my name?" And I hesitantly confirm it, although my heart starts to beat faster as I recognize the voice. It's the same man from the morning. This time, I'm not alone. So I instinctively press myself closer to Nina when he says, "Well, I'm bringing something for in my father's name, but it's in the car, and I parked around the street. Could you come and help me?" Encouraged by my friend's presence and all the people around, I say to him that my dad is actually home, so if he waits there, I'll go and get him, and he can bring him whatever he wants from the car, as I'm little and can't carry heavy stuff. The moment I said that, the guy got quiet and quickly starts walking away, borderline running. My friend, who already knew about what was happening in the morning, and I ran to my apartment. I told my dad. He gets up to go and chase the guy, but of course, there's no trace of him. My dad starts asking away if anyone's had any sign of this, but unfortunately no one seems to. Well, except for one grandma, an old lady living alone on the first floor, who says that a guy approached her earlier while she's sitting on the balcony, asking about our family, then tried to ask for money to pay for the meat he was bringing. As he told her that my parents had purchased it for him, she told him that he has no money, but stupidly gave away all the information. Now, we never heard anything about the guy again, thank God, but those questions are puzzling me. What did he want? How did he get my mum's name, but then said he was bringing something for my dad? Was he only focused on abducting me? I'm just glad I never had to find out. Okay, I haven't really thought about this in a long time. I think I tried to downplay what could have happened because it's easier than accepting the scary reality. So with that out of the way, here's my experience. I was about 13, so it was a good 5 years ago or so. I was at my friend's house, where I don't think I was supposed to be, and we're hanging out. My friend is 2 years younger than me, but we grew up together. So for the most part, everything's normal, until there's a knock on the next door. Now we're pretty sure that it can't be anyone normal. Now we're at her home alone, and we're definitely not expecting anyone. Now I'm a pretty fearless person for the most part, who has no regard for her own safety, but a strong regard for the safety of others. I walked to the door and peered through the curtains. Past the door, there's a man in his late 30s who was standing with a clipboard. His car wasn't in the driveway, but on the street by the house, I think. No, scratch that. I know he saw me because he began to speak. I'm here to fix your cable. My friend on the stairs has had people come down to do things before, but her parents always told her that it's gonna happen in advance. Her face looks confused and utterly terrified. She's not the bravest, but I did have a bad gut feeling. So by now I think, okay, don't open the door and he's gonna leave. A rational idea, right? Well, at this point, the man kept knocking. The knocking turns to banging. He must have been kicking the door too, because the sound was so loud and violent that I thought the frickin' door was gonna break. She lived on such a busy street, so I'm incredibly unsure how none of her neighbours knew that she is home alone at that time or heard the commotion. Of course, we panic, but I knew I had to take control of the situation. My friend's in no state to move, let alone take the lead. I was 13 though, so I was horrified out of my mind. Eventually, I snuck around to the kitchen grabbing a knife. I checked the back door and went to my friend who was sat on the stairs. The stairs are between each door, but have walls that go down each side, so out of sight. When I got back to the stairs, the knocking stopped. My heartbeat seemed to have stopped too, because it sounded like the world became empty. The front doorknob began to turn as he tries to open the door, which is followed by more silence. After maybe 15 seconds, I heard something that I was definitely not happy to hear. I know you're in there. Now you see. Now if I was an adult, there's no way the man would have said something like that, right? His tone was that of a crazy man, and it left me feeling as though every bone in my body suddenly turned to jelly. Either way, we sat very still. A couple of minutes passed and we thought we were in the clear. That's when I heard the gentle pulling, followed by loud banging on the backyard glass doors. At this point, I grabbed my friend and bring her upstairs. I grab the phone and we go to her mum's room, getting into the closet. I call the police, feeling physically ill, and talk to the lady on the line. She questions us, and my friend has started crying. I answer her questions and she tells me that someone's coming. We have to wait on the line. I felt like puking but kept incredibly calm to ensure that my friend doesn't fall into a panic attack. She's known to get worked up easily, and I couldn't keep her calm. Eventually the banging stops, and I begin to breathe again. And you still hear him. I say no. She tells me that I should check to see if he's still there, but says be quiet and careful. I slowly climb down the stairs and peek at the back door. No one's out there. I walk to the front and step into the room with a window and basically crawl to it. When I peek my head over, I see the man sitting on the stairs outside on his phone. I mean, this just sends me into a frenzy, so I respond in panic that he is. She tells me to go back and hide. The police are close. Eventually, after a long time, there's banging on the door again. This time it ends quickly. A nice lady officer calls to us from outside saying we can come out. We go downstairs and see a male officer talking to him while the woman confronts us. Apparently, the man works for a cable company and was informed to go back if no one was home and let himself in. I think anyone can see the flaw in his alibi, but he had a clipboard that had God knows what on it. The police check and let him out. The woman told us she believes us and not him, that he's actually weird and got away by the grace of God. I hate to think about what could have happened if the man got let in. I'm unsure if this even comes off as horrifying as it felt, but maybe the visual image of the man smiling at the back door that's burned into my memory is why it's frightening to think about still. Either way, I'm just so glad that we managed to get out of there safely. In 2014, when I was home alone, my then boyfriend, now husband, was at work, as I happened to have a very rare day off work. I was watching the Golden Girls as I snuggled around our two cats relaxed. I remembered feeling a strange dreadful feeling. I sat up from the couch and noticed that there's a man with shaggy and greasy long hair. What in the hell? He seemed to make eye contact even though he was roughly 2 blocks away, then suddenly broke into a sprint. I felt this moment in every inch of my body. I rushed into the front porch and locked the screen door before rushing back into the house and locking the main door leading into the house. He was suddenly at the side of our home, punching and kicking the side window of our home as he screams inaudible screams. Either that, or he wasn't opening his mouth enough to make sounds. I don't know which is more terrifying. I was shocked as I stared at him. Suddenly, he lunged off to the side and I realised that the side door might have also been unlocked. I ran to our side door and caught it right as I saw a face appear in the tiny window. I began to cry as I locked it before running into our spare bedroom. I whip out my cell phone, dialing 911 as I cry and try and explain the issue. For some reason, the story in my memory skips to my upstairs neighbour calling me about 5 minutes later. He says, "Are you okay?" I say, "I think I am." He began telling me what happens after I hid. Apparently, the man had run into his apartment and knocked calmly. So he answered. He had no way of knowing that the person at his door was not of sound mind, and I had not thought to warn him. He opened his door, leaving only a tiny screen between him and the man. He asked the man if everything's okay, to which the man begins screaming, "They're trying to kill me, help." He was shocked and backed up saying, "Please step back. I will call the police." By then, I'm downstairs dialing already. The man punched his door and ran downstairs, kicking and punching his car in the driveway as he screams about being chased and on the verge of being murdered. He pulled the car doors and punches at the windows as he screamed, and I begged the police to arrive faster. The police finally show up as the man was still fighting the neighbour's car. They had brought along an ambulance and took him away promptly, strapped to the back of a stretcher and a straitjacket. This happened to me last Tuesday, and I can't stop thinking about it. I'll start this story by saying that I'm a 30-year-old female who lives with my fiance and our 2 dogs. I have 2 huskies. My huskies are not guard dogs, but they can be good when they need to be. So anyway, it's 8 PM, dark out, and I'm home alone. My fiance had a hockey game. I'm in the bathroom with the door closed and the blow dryer going, so I can't really hear anything around me. That is, until I hear one of the dogs howl. I stop and listen, thinking that the dogs are fighting again. Then I hear the faintest knock and the dogs start going crazy, barking, howling, and jumping into the bay window. I think they're actually going to break it. I'm thinking, why are the dogs going crazy like that? Is it a skunk or something? And I look out my bedroom window as it was the closest view I had to the front door. Lo and behold, there's two men standing there in black hoodies. They start knocking louder, and this time my 2-year-old husky jumps from the bay window to the front door and starts growling, ramming his body into the door. I'm watching this from my bedroom as the dogs jump into the door. One of the men jumps back, startled, looks at the other guy and walks away. I called my fiance to get home ASAP. I watched them walk away down the road. They weren't selling anything. I was so creeped out. I mean, I still am. Thank goodness for my crazy dogs. Scary men at the door? Let's never meet again, please.